You're listening to Off the Court, a show dedicated to making you the best version of yourself as an athlete and as a person. I'm Coach Jack, CEO and owner of Close the Gate Hoops. If you want to take your life and game to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's get it. What up, gatekeepers? Back at you with another episode of Off the Court. Today, episode 12, I Am My Father's Legacy. Now, I am extremely excited and a little nervous to do this episode, but I'm finally ready to have an episode dedicated to my father, who will have, trust me, a lot of episodes dedicated to him. But it's starting to get to the point where there's a ton of listeners, and I really want to let them know who they're actually hearing it from. Recap of last episode 11 with Ryan. He and I are very similar, and I think it was extremely important to go over all the key concepts of how to get better more efficiently, which is a very overlooked aspect in all areas of improving life. People just think about getting better, but they don't actually think about how to get better faster. And that's really the difference between really successful people and not so successful people. We are closing in on nearly 2,000 total downloads between the entire podcast, which is absolutely insane. And if we are making an impact on you or motivating you to do better through this podcast, please let us know and share this podcast so we can make more influence on more lives. And it's crazy the amount of feedback that I've gotten from this podcast, and people have been like, you have seriously changed what I do throughout my day because of this podcast. And stuff like that makes me extremely motivated to keep going, because I know we have not even scratched the surface of what Close the Gate can do on impacting lives, which has me extremely excited for the future. But please let me know, let us know, Coach Aaron, Connor, Ike, any of us, if it's making an impact on you, because that's only going to motivate us to keep going. And just, we're only scratching the surface. I'm serious. CTG is about to get crazy. Please refer to friends if you like this podcast, so you can help affect their life. If you are a basketball player listening, how to fix your shot physically and mentally, the CTG Shooting Academy is the perfect blend of the knowledge, the drills, and the mindset necessary to become an elite shooter. It's everything I could have wanted when I was trying to become a better basketball player and shooter, and I'd be 5 times the player I am today if I would have had that information sooner. If you are interested in training, text me 608-201-7384 or direct message any of our social media pages at CTG Hoops. We currently have a wait list, and we just toppled over 100 students, which is absolutely insane to think about. But again, we're just scratching the surface. This CTG is seriously going to be all over the place soon. We're going fast, and we're going to keep growing, and obviously with the one mission in mind is just to make people better versions of themselves. So to dive into it, I am my father's legacy. And that quote actually is derived from Giannis's shoes, because his father also passed away, who had an extremely strong influence on his life. And I'm going to start living by that quote, because I feel the same thing when I read those words. I am my father's legacy. Anything that you've ever heard me say in this podcast, it's not my words. I almost cringe when I get compliments about the podcast and just all the things I've done since I started Close the Gate, and like being successful for my age. And I just cringe because it's all my father. It's my father's words. It's my father's work. None of it could even be close to where it is without him. And I don't feel like I should be taking credit for it. It's all his credit, and he deserves all of it. So everything I've ever said through this podcast that you think you've learned from me, you have not. You've learned it from my father, and that's why I am my father's legacy. Everything I do is because of him. It's through him, and everything CTG does from here on out, it's his work, not mine. But for those of you that do not know, my dad started Close the Gate 6 or 7 years ago. He built a court in our backyard. He was just like that. He was full of inspiration and ideas, and he just truly lived like YOLO. You only live once, and that's what he did each day. He was never scared. He was always just, if he got an idea, he was ready to do it no matter what. He didn't really think about the risks. He just wanted to make everyone around him better. My father passed away about 6 months ago, a little over 6 months, from cancer. and that's August of 2020. So he was diagnosed with a rare cancer in 2009 and was told he had 6 months to live in 2009. So he ended up surpassing his so-and-so called timeline by 11 years, which is absolutely remarkable, but it shows you how far you can get if you truly have a will to live. It's all that perception is reality stuff. Your body can do so much more than your brain lets you think you can, as Aaron said in one of the earlier episodes. But the definition of my father, he is probably the most famous, non-famous person everyone's ever met, meaning he was a community champion and he was everyone's best friend. And the reason for that is because he was just a great listener. He was a really, really good listener. He would sit down for hours and let people talk about themselves. And we'll get into that a little later in this episode. But he was just a truly genuine, great person, it's life. It's so hard to understand sometimes why something like that would happen to a person like him. And we'll dive into that a little more later. But it's hard for me, and I'm not even that's why I said I'm going to do more episodes on my father, because his life is just ridiculous. All the things he's accomplished and what he stood by and how he lived his life is truly what everyone should aspire to be. And that's been my goal my entire life, is just to be like my dad. And it's something I'll never be able to achieve. But the fact that he outlived his 6-month cancer diagnosis by 11 years is just ridiculous. It's hard for me to put into words, but basically I'll give you a quick rundown on his story. So he did play basketball at Craig. He won MVP his senior year. He took his team to state his senior year as well. That's got to be one of the last times Craig went to state, but he was a defensive player. Me and him were definitely different as basketball players. I'm definitely high offensive. He was high defensive, so it made for great one-on-one games before he got diagnosed with cancer. But he was really good. And I remember the first day I saw my dad play basketball, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Like literally every choice I've ever made has been to be like my father, which is why honestly I'm so excited to have kids, just to try and parent like my parents did, because I don't think they messed up once. They set me up for perfect success, which I'm truly grateful for. After he played Craig basketball, he was all over the place originally, but he ended up at Minnesota Morris, a Division II college, playing college basketball. I remember when I was a kid, I was like, dang, he played D2. And for those of you that don't know, he's 5'9", 5'8". So Division II basketball at that height, that's very difficult to do. My dad was also in a band. I strongly recommend all of you listeners go check that out. It's on Apple Music, actually. It's called HK, but on Apple Music, it's like H and K with like the and symbol. But his band's good. I'm also very blessed to have that after he's been gone, because I can listen to that and just so I never forget his voice and how he sounded like and things of that nature. But it's good. I strongly encourage you all to go check that out. That's one thing I want to do eventually after CTG blows up, is somehow get his albums to blow up, because they're deserving of it. It's good music. My dad also wrote a play called Postumptual Agreement, and that's actually what sparked me wanting to do an episode about my father. And I think it's time that the listeners know really who's behind all this. And I'll dive deeper into what Postumptual Agreement is, but that's basically what the whole episode will be based off of. Before Close the Gate, he actually created Local Vision, which was like, it was news online, so it wasn't on TV, and this was during like 2008. So he started this right before the recession, and he was ahead of the curve. So he got this idea before everyone else started doing online news, but the business went under because of the recession. And then when everyone came out of the recession, they started doing what Local Vision did, but my dad didn't have any money left to keep going with Local Vision. So that sucks, because that would have gone insane if there was no recession, but it led us to Close the Gate Hoops. So there's always a reason for everything, even though you don't understand it at the time, and you just think there's no way there's a reason for this. There is always a reason for the littlest things in the world and for the biggest things in the world. It's crazy as life prolongs. I believe it more and more and more. There's a reason for everything, because you can frame your rhetoric. When you believe that, you live happier, and it's just a fact. But if you don't truly believe it, then you're going to live not as happy, because you can turn any situation into a positive light if you think that way. Those are the main 5 that I put down in terms of his accomplishments and what he's done. And I didn't even say this. He created JBA. So for everyone in Janesville, I shouldn't say he created it. He had some other people help him create it, but I remember him telling me when I was like 8 years old about the idea of JBA, and then here he goes making it. He just got stuff done. It was ridiculous. Anything that popped in his head, he would do it. He would make it a reality. Just no fear. He never had fear. And I'm not going to be able to fit all of his accomplishments on this page, but I just wanted to give you a good mindset onto who he truly was. So why don't we dive in and talk a little bit about his play. So his play was called Postumptual Agreement, and he came up with this play idea when he got his diagnosis with 6 months to live. While he was on his hospital bed, you don't have a lot to do when you're on a hospital bed. You just got yourself and your brain and your thoughts. But Postumptual Agreement, basically, they remade the play in his honor on Zoom, so me and my family rewatched it a few weeks ago, which was pretty cool to see how much things have changed. And I forgot how cool it was to see. I'm, of course, a girl in the play. It's me. I'm the same age. My name's Sam, I think. But I thought that was funny that I was a girl. I remember being mad about that when I was a little kid, because the play actually happened when we were 10, and then they just redid it on Zoom now, and I'm 19 now. So it's been a while, but I can vaguely remember going to that play and everyone's crying and stuff. It was a big deal. But basically in this play, my dad writes a true story about his life, of him being diagnosed with a rare type of cancer and given 6 months to live. But in the play, what my dad does is the last 6 months of his life, he's trying to find my mom, his wife, a new partner, which is so funny to think about, because that's so him. He was just never in it for himself. It was always about someone else. So the last 6 months of his life in the play, he's maneuvering all these pieces to try and find another soulmate for my mom, so she's not alone. And that's all I could think about was everyone but himself. So he's not living in sorrow. He's not playing the victim card in the play. He's working with the last 6 months of your life. Just imagine that. You're told you got 6 months to live, and you're going to find your wife, someone to spend the rest of her life with. But in real life, this did not happen. My dad didn't actually do this because he didn't plan on dying, which he didn't for 11 years, which is ridiculous. But he got the idea when he was on his supposed deathbed. This play, I've got a lot of life goals on things I want to do and accomplish, but one of the biggest things is turning this play my dad made into a movie. He was in talks about doing it possibly, but once CTG blows up, I'm definitely going to be doing that. So 10, 20 years from now, if you see a movie come out called Postumptual Agreement, just know Close the Gate Hoops made that. But while I was watching the play, there were so many good little bits and pieces that I knew I could talk about on this podcast to make us all better versions of ourselves off the court. But there was 3 main concepts that I came up with after rewatching this play that was remade in honor of my father on Zoom. And the first one was heightened sensations. So my dad's character, I think his name was Steve in the play, but his character in the play talked about heightened sensations when you know that you're going to die. And I started doing more research on this, but once you're given like a timeline like that, like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to live, everything you look at, hear, smell is like times 5, because you're finally realizing you're not immortal, that you are going to die, and you're going to die soon, supposedly. not in my dad's case. But this is what these heightened sensations basically are, is a heightened sense of gratefulness. And my father was just grateful to be alive, especially when he surpassed that 6-month diagnosis, and he passed it by 10, 11 years, which is ridiculous. That's a whole decade after being told you're supposed to die in 6 months. But I want you gatekeepers to start practicing this, and this is endless gratefulness. Your gratefulness list does not end. Everyone's going through something. Everyone has their hardships, but everyone has something that they can be grateful for and appreciate. And that gratefulness list should not end. So I encourage you, gatekeepers, every single night before you go to bed, write down 3 things you were grateful for that day. And this will increase your heightened sense of awareness, and everything around you is just going to be much happier. You might look at something and just smile, and it might be as simple like a book or, a bird. But this heightened sense of awareness is because of gratefulness. And I tweeted this out to our email subscribers the other week, but it was, we all have 2 lives. Your second life starts when you realize the first one ends. And when I heard that quote, I was like, wow, that is perfect. Because we go through life not really accepting that we're going to die. We try and get away from it. We shy away from it because we're scared of it. We don't want to face the fact that we're going to die. That's a very scary fact to look into and actually think about. But once you do that, the want to grind and work towards something jumps up a whole 100%. It's ridiculous. And you don't feel like, I didn't think about dying until my dad died 6 months ago. And now I'm just on a nonstop grind to pass on his legacy and do everything that he was accomplishing and more. And that's why I say everything you hear is him right now. This is all his work. And that's called generational influence. Obviously, it doesn't matter how big CTG gets, but the main goal is making everyone that it comes in contact with better. But it could keep going down the line, and 50 to 100 years plus, my dad's still making generational influence because it went from him to me and then whoever on there after that. But that all started with my father. And generational influence was in the first episode of Why We're Here, and that's just to influence and make people better. Another great example of heightened sensations is prisoners on death row. I was watching a show on Netflix. It was I Am a Killer. Definitely for older kids. Younger kids do not watch this. But it was basically people that were put on death row, and a lot of them, crazy or not, become like pastors and ministers because they come to the fact that they're going to die. And you truly start to change your person when you realize that fact. But 99% of people, they shy away from it because it's scary, because they're fearful of it. And fear, that's the number one thing that holds us all back throughout our life. The second thing after reflecting about Postumptual Agreement was true selflessness. And my dad embodied this. This was definitely his number one strength. And this is something I'm trying to acquire, but it's so hard because for him it was like genetic. He didn't have to try to work for this. He just had true care and compassion for everyone, no matter who it was. It did not matter. But it can't be synthetic, this care for other people and just wanting everyone to be better. It can't be derived from selfishness, meaning you're going throughout your day and you're going, I'm going to go help someone. Maybe you'll give them $10 or something, a really kind act, right? But that's derived from making yourself wanting to feel better. Like you want to feel better, so you're going out to help other people. That's not genuine. That's not genuine care and compassion for people. You're just trying to help yourself by doing things for other people. See, he didn't have that. It was true, genuine care. It was never about him. There was nothing about him in that instance. It was always about someone else. So true selflessness is something that I want you guys to try and practice. It's obviously it's very difficult, and I'm not even close to achieving what my dad did with true selflessness, because it's almost like it was a gene to him. It's like some kids are born to jump really high and some aren't. He just has that true care gene. The number one thing, and I talked about this earlier, that my dad was really good at was listening to people. It didn't matter who it was. He would sit there for hours. And us as kids, we would try to go somewhere, like maybe pick up something from the store, go to groceries, or go out to eat. And yeah, we'd plan on being there for an hour, and it always ended up being like 3, because my dad would sit there and talk to someone for triple the amount of time we were supposed to be there. And that's what it was like being his kid. But the main reason is because he'd sit there and listen to people talk about themselves for hours and hours and hours. And that's why people loved him, because they knew they could go to him to just spew everything out. And we talked about this earlier in previous episodes of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I strongly recommend you to read that if you haven't. That's one of the greatest books of all time. But it's the number one thing that people love to talk about is themselves. And my dad mastered that, and he knew that, so he would just sit there and listen. And that's exactly why everybody loved him. The third and final reflection I had after rewatching Postumptual Agreement is maximizing your life. And I was watching this in a video the other day, and it was Kevin Hart on a podcast. And he goes, "What does your book look like?" And I eventually ended up tweeting it and sending it out to my email subscribers on our website page. And it just really stuck with me, because my dad's book was cut half short of the average lifespan. And to have that happen to someone that's just, he's on the earth to make people better. And when you see something so terrible happen to someone so good, it just makes no sense. And that goes right back to believing everything happens for a reason. You have to believe that, so it doesn't just eat you up inside. But his book was filled. His book had 5 times the amount of what the average person's book, the normal lifespan, would be. So the lifespan's like 80 years right now, and he lived to 50. So nearly 60%. So 40% cut short his book was. But that book has 5 times more enjoyable to read than the average lifespan's book, because the average person, their book is what everyone else does, because all they do is listen to other people. But I could reread my dad's book for the rest of my life, and his book's half the length of normal people's. And that's what I really want you gatekeepers to try and understand is, you're writing your book right now. Would you want to reread your book? Would your book be the most interesting book in the world, and would you pick your book over everyone else's? Because you should. It's your life. But most people, they'd pick someone else's book because all they did was listen to other people. They didn't want to achieve true greatness. They just listened. They never trusted their gut. They stayed reserved. They didn't take risks. They were just average. And it sucks to see that happen to so many people, because I know for sure all I'm going to do is try and live my book to the fullest, because that's all you can control. You cannot control the length of your book, but you can control what you put in that book. So really focus on that, gatekeepers. You cannot control the length of your book, but you can control what you put in your book. It's all about what the controllables are. And just ask, who's the narrator? Are other people narrating your life right now, or are you narrating your life? Are you trusting your gut? Or are you taking other people's opinions way too much into account? That's one thing I've mastered, is not wasting time. Most people that know me, I love learning about productivity and how to maximize productivity to the fullest extent. I can't find myself not doing anything, which at times you do need. You do need times to chill for your body and brain to recuperate. But I just hate wasting time, because I know I have a limit. And that's all about that second life thing. Your second life starts when you realize the first one ends. And after seeing someone, my best friend, I didn't even say that in the beginning. Like, all I would talk about with the last 2 weeks my dad was alive, we would just talk about how we were best friends and just how much we loved each other. And that's why it's just so hard to put into words what the feeling is. Just not being able to talk to your best friend, and it just stops. I guess I'll go into a little more detail about it. What happened was he went to his hospital. Like, sometimes he would get sick and he would lose a lot of weight and he couldn't keep anything down, but he would always come back. He was a trooper. He'd always come back. But this time he didn't come back. And my mom walked in the door one day and she's like, "It's not good." And that's when it kind of hit me, because life was going normal. I wasn't really worried about it because he'd always come back. And And then he didn't. We all knew that it was going to happen. But if my father wasn't who he was, I have no idea where I'd be right now. Because he installed all the life lessons in me to be able to handle something like this by losing your best friend. I'll recap the 3 points from the Postumptual Agreement that I read is heightened sensations, okay? You truly realize that you got one life. It's limited, all right? And you're going to die someday. You're not immortal. You are mortal. True selflessness, okay? It can't be synthetic. You can't do something for someone because you want to make yourself feel better. And then the third is maximizing your life. Never, ever, ever waste time because you don't get that time back. You can't control how long your book is, but you can control what you put in it. And are you putting in a lot of wasted time? Ask yourself that right now, because I'm controlling the one thing I can't control. I'm not going to waste time. I know I got a limit here, and I'm going to do everything I can to fill this book up, to whatever my pages lead me to. And so those are the 3 main concepts that I want to talk to you gatekeepers about. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the Proudness Moment, and what I was talking about earlier, what happened to my father towards the end of his life. It goes well into this. And when my dad had a lot of speeches towards the end of his life because he didn't know what was going to happen. None of us know what's going to happen. You're extremely scared. You don't know how you're going to die or how it works. It just slowly happens. So we'd have like a speech every night. And the first night he got home after he was in the hospital, he was home for like a week or so until he passed. He had this proudness moment, and he got up, he could barely breathe, he could barely speak, and we're all just sitting around because none of us wanted to leave him. And he just goes, I could never show you how truly proud I am of this family. And the image is just ingrained in my mind. I'll never forget it because he just had so much emotion inside him when he said that. When he said that, the feeling for me when I heard it was just weird. I can't describe what it felt like because all I've done my entire life is to just try and make him proud. All I wanted to do was be my father. And to hear him say those words was just weird. But it was a special moment for us all to hear him say that, especially when he could barely speak. He was so weak. But after he started talking about how proud he was of all of us, he goes, family is the core of happiness. And that has stuck with me from the moment he said that. Never, ever, ever take your loved ones for granted. And ever since my dad got sick when I was a kid, I made sure that I said love you to my mom and dad anytime I left them, ever. Going to the gas station, I would say I love you. And now, since my dad died, I started saying it to my sisters too. I didn't want to risk it. I couldn't even imagine what would happen if I lost one of them. And so that's why I truly encourage all you gatekeepers to say I love you no matter where you're going to. You're taking a 2-minute walk with your dog, or you're letting your dog outside or something. You never know what's going to happen, okay? You don't want to live with regret. Regret is one of the worst things a human can live or feel throughout their life. And I strongly urge you keepers, make it a habit. Tell your loved ones that you love one and truly mean it, because you never know, it might be the last time you ever speak to them. But just remember that as you're going throughout your life, that family is the core of happiness. And we all go through it. We're all teenagers. We're all kids. All we want to do is go hang out with our friends. But just remember what my dad said, that family is the core of happiness. Because all we do as humans is chase that happiness feeling, when in reality, it's right around us the entire time. It's right in front of our faces, and it's our family. But all we're doing is chasing something that is already in front of us. So that was a little difficult podcast for me to talk about, and there's going to be a lot more to come, but I just want you gatekeepers to remember that anything you've ever learned from me, or any influence I've ever put on you, or any influence that CTG has ever put on you, it's all my father, Tony Huml, okay? His words are my words. Everything that I've ever said, it's him talking to you, and I just want you to know that, because he deserves all the credit in the world. I deserve none of it, because he taught me literally everything. So anything I've ever taught you, it's my dad teaching you. So all the influence he's making right now, I really think he'd be proud of the men and women the gatekeepers are becoming. So thank you guys for listening, and I just want you to remember, family is the core of happiness, and I am my father's legacy. I'm Coach Jack. We out, baby. Peace. Thank you, gatekeepers, for listening. Make sure you're staying up to date and have listened to every single podcast. Please rate us on whatever platform you're listening to this on to be submitted into our Review of the Day contest. This is where we'll give you a shout out if you give us a review, and we can talk about you on the podcast. The reviews will help whatever platform you're listening to it on reach a wider and global audience. That's what it's all about, trying to impact and influence as many lives as possible for the better. If you have been a part of Close the Gate and have been following along for our journey, do not be afraid to submit testimonials. They can be video or text. This will help others see how much true change Close the Gate can make on a life. We love as many questions as possible for new topics to talk about. Don't be afraid to reach out to me, Coach Jack, at jackhummel12@gmail.com or text me 608-201-7384. We want critique. Always strive for the better. You are never too good at something. You can always contact us about literally anything. We're always going to be here for you. Lastly, if you like this episode of Off the Court, please take a screenshot and share it with whatever social media platform you're on to be entered into a contest so that we can notice who's listening to this and whose lives we're impacting, and if what we're giving you is what we want, because that's what it's all about. We're here to solve your problems, what your biggest desires and answers want to be. Thank you guys so much. Stay tuned. We're going to keep feeding you this free education and content. It's going to keep coming. We are not going to stop. I'm Coach Jack. Thanks for listening, gatekeepers. I'm out.
Peace.